Thanks so much, Jay. It's great to be here with you.
Sorry, I butchered the introduction there for a moment. I was like,
hey man, they got us. Now we've got something to work towards.
Yes, exactly. It was a good save there. But you've done so many incredible things. I just didn't know which one to mention first.
Oh well, that's kind of it.
It's great to have you on the show, man. The very first question that I do have for you is a question that I normally love asking all my guests at the very start anyway, which is, what does success look like for you?
It's interesting that you would start with that question, Jay. That's one of the questions that sticks with me from theater school. Actually, I went to the theater school at DePaul University, and one of our teachers, Jim Ostelhoff, asked us that in our third year, and everybody kind of went around the circle trying to get the right answer. And of course, there's no right answer. I think for me, success is being able to be happy in the moment wherever I am. And I'm still working towards it. That's going to be a lifelong journey, and I'm happy to be on that journey.
It's simple.
I don't know that I don't know. I remember at that time everybody was kind of going around the circle and being like, I think it would be like getting to choose whatever project I want, or I think it would be driving around in a Countach. I think all these different things, but to me, I have been with the same woman since right after college, and we are blessed with 2 children, and I feel so grateful to be in this moment with the 3 of them. And that feels to me about as close to success as I can hope for.
Yeah, I love that, man. What do you think that you've learned over the course of your life that it means to be really happy?
I've learned that if I cling to the best moments and I measure the rest of my life against them, I'm setting myself up for more sadness. If I treat the dark moments and the light moments with equanimity, I find I tend to live closer to what we would call happiness.
Yeah. So what are some other things in your life aside from your family and your kids that make you happy currently?
Well, as we were talking about before we started rolling on this, I am back in my home state of North Carolina. We're living in the mountains. And this, to me, is the most, and I know you'll push back on this, Jay. It's the most beautiful part of the world, and I have been fortunate in my life to see many beautiful parts of this world. But this is kind of like my my Narnia or my Shambhala that I always keep coming back to. So being in this part of the world gives me great joy. Hearing my kids laugh gives me great joy. Finding a funny podcast or a funny TV show, something that I can kind of tune out to with my wife for the hour and a half that we can stay awake after the kids go to bed, that gives me joy. Running the dog gives me great joy. He's about 1.5 years old, and he's got boundless energy. So we run him in a field all the time, and we never wear him out.
What sort of dog have you got?
He's a border collie. And they're herding dogs, and they are built to go nonstop. We had him in a daycare, like a doggy daycare, for a couple of days because we had some stuff going on during the day and couldn't look after him. And the guy said, he was like, you might want to look into getting a GPS collar for him, because we got another dog here that's wears a GPS collar, and he does about 10 miles a day. I think Cash is doing about 30 miles a day.
Goodness me. I've got a German Shepherd. She's almost 3 years old, so I know what you mean about the endless energy. I mean, we had to take her for 2 walks a day sometimes just to wear her out. Or we'd take her for car rides, and she loves the breeze on her face because it kind of like tires it out. It's like a drug for her. And then when she gets home, she's like crashed on the couch. It's quite funny to see.
Oh, it's great.
So,
I mean, so like Cash will do all this running like that. And today I took him on a hike. We were back in the woods and we only did like, 2.5 miles, maybe 3 plus, maybe about 4 kilometers. And he is just like totally checked out. And to me, the math doesn't compute. You'd think you could go on and on and on, but he's just like something about the hills. I think it was like being in the woods and hearing little rustles here and there. He's so alert all the time that it was just, like an overdose on stimulus for him. And he couldn't see it. Like he's used to being in an open field and dealing with sheep and like maybe one wolf, but this was too much.
I think it was too also far. The mountain air as well that was sort of getting to him too. Yeah. I can't push back on saying that North Carolina is the most beautiful part of the world because I haven't been there, so I can't really push back on it. But I do want to ask you, you grew up in North Carolina, I believe, but you also mentioned to me that you left, I believe, was the age of 18. Why did you decide to leave at the age of 18?
At that age, I'd grown up in Charlotte, and I was, looking back on it, I was incredibly lucky because I had, to this day, I have friends that I grew up with. My kids ask me, how long have you known Kara? How long have you known Courtney? And I don't remember meeting these people. Like we've literally known each other our entire lives. I went to kindergarten through high school with a lot of the same people. And by 18, I was ready to just get the hell out of Dodge and conquer the world. I was also I was raised with just my parents. I have another sibling, but she's a half sister, and we were not raised together. So I think I was just restless to get out and see the world, and I couldn't come up with the scratch to audition for Juilliard. But I could afford to audition for DePaul, which was in Chicago, and I was lucky enough to be accepted there. And Chicago seemed to be a tamer city at the time than New York did. So I got my mother's blessing to go to Chicago. So that's where I moved to when I was 18.
So did you always want to be an actor? Was that something that you had always thought about, or was it kind of something that you found along the way?
As a kid, maybe about 10, 11, 12 years old, I did a couple commercials, and I did some plays at the local children's theater. I did, Oliver Twist, and I did the best Christmas pageant ever. And then I got braces, and I had braces forever. And so kind of somewhere in the middle of that, I got into, my dad was a life insurance salesman, and the company that he was allied with went under. And I didn't understand at the time. And to me, that meant my dad had lost his job. And I felt like I had to find a way to secure my future. And this was around 8th grade. And so I went up to the Marine Master Sergeant, who was the head of Naval Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps at my junior high school. And I asked him if I could be in his next year's class. And so for about a year and a half, I did ROTC. Taught by Master Sergeant Paget there at South Mech. And I really thought that was going to be my future. I thought that I was in line to go to the Naval Academy. And if I didn't get into the Naval Academy, I'd be at Parris Island right after high school. That lasted, as I say, for about a year and a half. And I kind of decided to go a different direction. And within a year and a half after that, I had really long hair, went from like a high and tight and, wearing my uniform in the hallways at high school to having really long hair and wearing Birkenstocks all over the place and rainbow suspenders because Robin Williams was my idol.
Good old Robin Williams. Miss that guy. Wish he was still alive today, to be honest. So where did you go to from there, man? Like were you 19 at that time?
Well, so getting out of the ROTC, that was actually, he would bring kids in early to be cadet commanders for the 9th grade class. So I did 8th grade and I did about half of 9th grade. And after that, I got into speech and debate. and I became interested in an event called humorous interpretation. You'd take a 10-minute cutting of a play or a TV show or a movie, and you would perform all the characters. And I became a 2-time state champion in North Carolina, 2-time district champion. I went to nationals a couple times. And so I was able to kind of scratch the acting itch with that. But I wasn't in theater class in high school. And then at the very end of high school, my debate coach tapped the theater professor at the high school and asked if I could get into the senior level acting class. And she let me in. And then, as I mentioned earlier, kind of a lark, really, I auditioned for this very prestigious theater conservatory in Chicago. And the acting teacher at Charlotte had picked out all these great audition pieces for me, and none of them spoke to me. So I ended up doing a monologue from one of the musicals we had performed that year. And she was kind of like, "Well, I good luck," because I don't think that's gonna help you. But they saw something and they took a chance on me, and I got in. And that school at the time, DePaul, was one of the last theater schools that would cut students after each year. So for the first year, we had something like 72, 73 kids, and you go home or you get a job in the summertime, and then you get a letter that says, "Please come back for your sophomore year," or "Please find something else to do with your life." And I made it past the first cut, and then after the second year, they cut it in half again. And if you make it past that, then you get to go the whole way through. So I was able to graduate, and then right around graduation, my wife had been a classmate the entire way through, and we kind of fell in love when we were doing Showcase, going to New York and Los Angeles, and very shortly after college, I had a job at Chicago Shakespeare Theater. It was their first show on Navy Pier, and I got to play, a sort of a smaller role, and got to that was really when my education as an actor truly began, because I got on stage with all these amazing Chicago talents, Scott Parkinson, Greg Winkler, Kevin Goodall, Lisa Dodson, Bradley Armacost, all these amazing Chicago stalwart actors. And I felt as safe as a baby in my mother's arms. And so from then I did, years and years of theater in Chicago, Milwaukee, and a couple touring shows, and did a lot of voiceover. And from there kind of started getting into movies and television as they came to Chicago.
There's quite a few questions that I have coming from that answer, man. Like, there's a lot for me to unbox there. The one thing that I do want to ask you before I continue asking some more questions is, what was it about acting in particular that you fell in love with the most?
My dad was a super positive and funny guy. He was loved in every room that he went into. He could make people laugh. He was always cracking jokes. And he always compared himself to Alfred E. Newman from, Mad Magazine. Yeah. What, me worry? And that was kind of my dad. And I thought, and he also did a lot of commercials and theater and voiceover in Charlotte when I was growing up. And I always kind of wanted to be like him. I certainly wanted to emulate those aspects of his personality. And as a kid, and throughout high school and even throughout college, they did their best to beat this out of me in college. I was a clown. I was always goofing around. I was always pushing back against authority. I really wanted to do it my way. And that conservatory approach gave me a vocabulary that was a shared vocabulary in the arts world and in theater and film and television. But it also, kind of like going to Parris Island for the Marine Corps, it stripped away all of the crutches that you sort of come to the table with as an actor. And I guess that's a good thing. in some respects, but in other respects, those crutches, one could argue, are what make you unique.
Yeah.
And so I've worked hard to kind of get back to who I was before I even went.
Did you face like a lot of challenges starting out?
I absolutely faced challenges starting out. I was lucky, or rather I was fortunate, I should say, to book jobs in theater. I got my union card for the stage very quickly after graduation, very early, in a city that was lousy with talented white guys my age, my type, who were non-union. So it's a lot to ask a theater to pay you more than these other guys that they can pay less than half as much. They don't have to pay towards your health care or any of these things. But I knew that was all I wanted to do. And I would get further and further out on that tree limb, and I was just going to keep dancing until it broke. So I decided that I wanted to be saving for my retirement. I wanted to have health care. I wanted to have all these things locked down, and it was worth it to me to take that chance. And I would work really at that early stage, maybe about once or twice a year in theater. And throughout that time, I was dispatching trucks, 40 hours a week. Sometimes I was working the night shift doing that. But that, that's the way it is. So many people in this industry work those survival jobs, and some people never stop working them. I had also bussed tables. I'd worked at a canoe and kayak shop. I did whatever I could do to kind of make the ends meet, until I got to a point where I was in a show that had a bit of an open-ended run, and I had booked a couple voiceovers, and I look back and I was like, the balls on this kid to quit his job, but I did, and I think I took unemployment a couple times, but that was back then, and I've been able to cobble it together ever since then. And I always feel grateful when I talk to my mom or I talk to my wife. I feel like I always say I get to do this voiceover today, or I get to travel to so and so and do this job, because it feels like a gift to wake up in the morning and to get to work a 14 or 16 hour day doing the thing that you love. As tough as it could be, it is an answered dream, no doubt there.
Did you ever think, when you were working those particular jobs, did you ever think, like, was there a moment where you thought that you weren't going to quite make it and do the things that you love doing full time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the honest answer is finding that belief in yourself to keep pushing is sometimes the toughest part of a journey, anyone's journey, whether it be a person who wants to make it through law school and become a lawyer, or a person who is, supporting 2 kids and working 3 jobs. How are you going to get through this day? Are you ever going to go to the beach again? Are you ever going to make enough money to get on a plane again? I absolutely deal with that. But I know, and I have known for a long time, what I'm here to do. And feeling like you have a calling that you're answering is a very powerful feeling. I can't turn away from it. There's nothing else at this point in my life that I feel I'm qualified to offer the world. Mm-hmm. So, like I said before, it's like you really are getting further and further out on this limb, and you're just going to keep doing the dance because that's what you've got to offer the world. So yeah, that's kind of where I am with it. And the answer to your question is yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. We were doing some press for Dopesick, and it was me and Peter Sarsgaard and Jake McDorman. And the journalist asked us, do you guys, now you've got this great show coming out and things seem to be going great for you. Do you ever remember a time where you didn't know what your next gig was going to be? And we're all sitting there with long hair and beards, and we're like, right now? It's like, that's the reality, you just keep swinging. And when you get these jobs, generally a lot of the actors that I know and have worked with are financially very conservative people. Like, you get a plate full of food, you take a couple bites and you put the rest of it in a drawer,
I like to call it persistence as well, as that inner belief, that inner drive that you just somehow know that it's going to work out for you some way, somehow. You don't like see the steps to get there, but you just know that it's going to work itself out eventually. And I think it's also like, along with the persistence, there's also a lot of patience that also is attributed to it. I mean, I'm still like 25 and I'm still learning this as I'm going, but it's very much like the creative industry I've noticed is mostly cutthroat. There's a lot of people that want to be part of it. And it's even more difficult now to quote, make it or get. I think nowadays, if you just get a job, one job, you're happy and you're grateful, like, because then who knows where that could lead to? Could lead to another one down the line. So, yeah, man.
I think you're right. I think you're right, Jay. And what you just said reminds me of something that I've often thought of in the past, which is when times are the toughest, I often think of my future self sending good vibes back in time to my current self.
Yeah, that's good.
I think of one day I'm going to get out of this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be in this place forever. And I have faith in that. And I draw that faith from this idea that my future self is sending back strength.
Yeah. I like that. I'm going to remember that. I needed to hear that actually. So thank you for sharing that. If you were, John, to go back to your younger self and give yourself just one piece of advice as you're going along the journey, what piece of advice would you want to give yourself, your younger self? And do you think you would change anything in your life as well?
I believe it was a Maya Angelou quote where she says, essentially, I would not give anything for my journey now. As hard as so many moments in my life have seemed and have truly been, they have built the person who is sitting here talking to you. And I have to be grateful for the knocks that I've taken and for the lessons that I've learned. Because if I hadn't have taken them, if I hadn't have digested them, I would be due to repeat those lessons, or I would be due to learn them from scratch. I feel like I would counsel my younger self that it's not necessary to run constantly. Sometimes you can walk and get to the same place in the same amount of time.
Mm. Yeah, it's oftentimes so easy for us to get ahead of ourselves because we want it now. Like I mentioned before, the patience factor, we can be very impatient. So I think it's a good lesson for anyone at whatever stage of life you're at. Just stop to just focus on what you have right now. I think just the attitude of gratitude, that's important. So I think another good lesson to learn, man. I appreciate you sharing it.
Yeah, I agree, Jay.
So moving along your story a little bit, I wanted to ask, which film for you was like one of your favorites to be on, like being a part of it? Which one, Harold or Kumar, or the Public Enemies one, or was it a smaller film for you? I'm always curious about this one. Do you have a favorite, or is it like a combination of favorites? You're allowed that too.
Yeah, this is This is probably not going to be this is probably going to surprise you. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I always pushed back against the fact that a lot of my career, I've gotten to do funny commercials and voiceover and things like that. It's kind of like this, this little secret that I try not to tell everybody about. I'm like, no, look, I played Hamlet. Look at this. But I think some of the funnest work that I've gotten to do and the most fun I've had, it's all super rewarding at the end of the day when you make it through. Like I think back to times on Jack Ryan when I, hurt myself or we were just pushing and pushing and pushing to get the shot, and we were in a jungle or we were in a desert. I have a wonderful friendship with a commercial director, Jim Jenkins, and I've gotten to do so many different fun spots with him over the years. And they're not like, there were people got to see him here in the States, and the thing that I love about them is they're like short form sketches or improvisations that when people see them on television, generally they're caught off guard by them. They laugh. I got to do a spot with Robert De Niro. I got to do, I did a couple FedEx spots with him. I did this long running campaign for Bud Light where I played a king who was just a complete and total idiot. And it was so much fun. And we shot that all over the world. We shot that in New Zealand, which I mentioned to you. I know you're going to get angry now. I'm talking about New Zealand. But we shot it in Spain. We were in New York with that. And it was just an absolute blast because we did that for 3 years. We had the same director of photography, line producer, director. It was like a family. And I think that's something that it's always appealed to me, this idea of like landing in a show where you get to dig into a really long arc and you get to go different places with it. And you're with a group of actors that really become like a family because you're doing it year in, year out. Technicians, crew, creatives, the whole thing. And that so far is like the closest I've been to that because from season 1 to season 2 of Jack Ryan, it was really John Krasinski, Wendell Pierce, Allison. There's a few people that came to the second season from the first season, but for the most part, it was just a small group of us. I love being around other actors. I love the friendships that get forged when you're just going crazy by the end of these really long days, or if it's a night shoot, which man, I got to tell you, those are just brutal. Anybody will tell you it's like your body is not meant to work like that, but it's an acquired skill and a discipline, and great friendships are formed through them.
I myself am not a night person. I struggle. Like I don't like doing night interviews, but I will do them if I need to.
Oh yeah. What time is it where you are right now?
It's 8:33 a.m. currently in Sydney, Australia. I'm more of a morning person. Like, believe it or not, I'm much more awake at 4 a.m. than I am at 10 p.m. at night. So I am usually in bed around 8 p.m. Sydney time because that's usually when my brain goes to sleep. It just wants to shut off. But I tell you, man,
if you get to a point where you have children, that will, I always like my wife and I, if we can just stay awake past our older child is 12 now. And he's hit his growth spurt. He wants to kind of stay up and hang out and talk. And we're like, all right, buddy, go to bed so mom and dad can watch some TV, just kind of hang out and have adult talking time. But, the end of the day, man, you're just so beat. And then the days start early. But but I got to tell you, this is the best part of my life so far, is getting to be like right in it with these two little human beings. And the period of COVID we treated it like found money, like it was a gift. It was an opportunity to just really dig into a period of prolonged, intense togetherness. We did not spend vast amounts of time on our screens, which I'm grateful for. We spent a lot of time outside. When we were still in Illinois, we had this great, we had some land in the northwestern part of the state. It's kind of hilly out there. It's beautiful. And we had a little one-room cabin, no electricity, no running water. There were a couple springs on the property. But we would be out there with a wood-burning stove and oil lamps and just listening to the barred owls and the coyotes. And man, it was so very special. So I'm grateful for that time. I'm grateful that we were able to have that experience, as tough as it was, for other reasons.
Yeah. I think in today's day and age, we've kind of we're more wired than ever before, but we're kind of losing that connection with nature, with our true selves. And I think just being able to get outside, I think also the pandemic kind of made a lot of people just stop and reflect on their life. And yes, I know a lot of people did also go out in nature and enjoy themselves in nature as much as they possibly could. I know I did a lot of that, a lot of walks outside with friends and family. It was a beautiful time, man. So I completely understand that. I mean, we weren't allowed to really go too far, but there's a place here in the Blue Mountains that is just a beautiful place to be. It's so serene as well. The views are incredible. If you go there at the right time, that is, you can see it. But yeah, man, I think you're right. It's just being grateful for who you have in your life currently and what you have in your life currently too. So kind of a similar message to what we were just mentioning before, the show that you were a part of called Dopesick. And I wanted to ask you how that all came about and what were some of the lessons that you learned while being on that show, and what are some of the things that you didn't enjoy and what are some things that you did enjoy? I know there's quite a few questions in there.
Yeah. So Dopesick, the show, is drawn primarily from the source material of the book by the same name, Dopesick, by Beth Macy. And what she does in the book is she charts the course of the opioid crisis in the United States, from the creation of the drug OxyContin by Purdue Pharma. And she takes a good long look at how that company got OxyContin, which is essentially opium, lab-made opium, through the approval process at the FDA and to market, and how they created a market for it in the United States by saying, well, we have to create conversations about pain in doctors' offices all across the country. So we have these charts in doctors' offices in the United States. You still see them occasionally with several smiley faces on them, going from happy to anguish. And they ask you to put your finger on the one that feels like how you feel, represents how you feel. And based on that, we then prescribe a drug like OxyContin, an opioid. And Contin stands for continuous release. The idea that you pop this pill and over a sustained period of time, 12 hours per pill, there's a slow release of opium that addresses your problem, your pain. Of course, very quickly after this drug was rolled out in communities where people were mining, were farming, doing a lot of intense manual labor and suffering severe injuries, it became clear that this drug was ripe for abuse.
Mm.
And a narrative came down from Purdue Pharma that only drug addicts abuse drugs. So the onus is placed on the patient who has been prescribed this drug for sometimes sort of middling injuries, not necessarily life-threatening injuries. And I think it's also important to note that this is perhaps a useful tool for doctors who are treating patients who are, coming out of open heart surgery and are going to be in the hospital for a few days. And doctors need to manage that pain while the patient is there at the hospital. That's different from, I had a family member who was running their dog in a field recently and broke her ankle. Went to the ER and was sent home with a prescription for OxyContin. Mm-hmm. Because I was working on this show, she was super familiar with it and called her general practitioner, that's her main doctor, and they prescribed her some different medication that was non-addictive. As you can probably tell from me kind of talking about it there for a second or two, I learned a great deal about how this crisis came into existence. And that's down to Beth Macy's book. Certain aspects of it are infuriating because we want to be able, as people in a country who vote, we want to be able to trust the people that we've voted for to take steps to make sure that we're taken care of and protected and that we're safe and that our best interests are at the heart of every decision they make. And of course, this is the United States, and the business of the United States is business.
Yeah.
So oftentimes it's really down to money.
Yeah.
And that's a very scary thing to be reminded of in a country where people like to tell themselves that we're civilized and we care for one another and we want to see ourselves as good people. Yeah. I think the story is very, very important because from time to time, we generally walk around in this country, I imagine it's similar in Australia, feeling like we've been slipped a Mickey, like we haven't gotten the entire story. We've been lied to, or we've been cheated, or something along those lines. It's occasionally important to be reminded exactly in which ways we've been cheated and we've been lied to. And here in this country, it's important to learn that we keep using this phrase, buyer beware. Just because you go into a doctor's office and you're face to face with a medical professional that you trust, you still need to do some research before you put a drug in your body. Because some of these drugs can obviously have life-altering effects.
It's very interesting because if Big Pharma is doing that for that drug and the general population likes trusting the government and Big Pharma and the medical professionals, it oftentimes raises the question, well, if they're doing that with that, what else are they doing as well behind the scenes? So I think it raises a very, very important question that I hope people start listening to. I really do, to be honest with you, man, because it is an important issue and it's one that needs to be addressed because you're right, it is mostly about money, which as sad as that is the truth. And I think it needs to somehow change. But yeah.
I think that I feel like the journey of my life over the last couple years has been about building more empathy into the way I see other people. Yeah. There have been very tough things, very difficult things that my family has had to go through in that period of time. And of course, that's all against the backdrop of COVID-19. So I know that as tough as things have felt for people in my immediate sphere, things have been tough for other people in their worlds as well. And that it's very important when there's so much drama and tension and anger and pain in the world to extend grace to one another and to give one another the benefit of the doubt, and to remember you don't know what this person's backstory is. You don't know what this person's going through today or what they went through yesterday.
I think being able to just have a conversation, like open-ended conversation, man, like what you and I are doing right now, and not have this fear attached to it that what I'm going to say here is going to cause offense or, belittle another person of their experience or whatever it is, because that only just causes resentment and hate. And then it causes what we're seeing in the world, sadly, today is this massive divide. And it's sad to see. So I like how you mentioned giving people a little bit of empathy, giving them a chance at least, giving them a bit of grace as well, I like saying. And just I'm that very person that just says, show up in love. No matter how hard it actually is, show up in love. Mm-hmm. And times are, it looks like it's getting worse and worse as the days are going on, but I still hope. I still hope for humanity. I'm the eternal optimist, man.
Well, I think you have to be. And, another saying comes to mind. When I was a kid, there was a youth minister at my church who I think somebody went up to him and was kind of giving him some backstory on a kid in our youth group that had some issues. And I don't know if they were like behavioral issues or family issues, but the kid was kind of had been a bit of a jerk to a lot of other kids. And the youth minister was kind of like, hang on, I think it's really important for people to write their own stories with me.
Yeah.
And I've never forgotten that. If we allow other people to write those stories for us, then we rob ourselves of the opportunity to get to meet people where they are and really get to see one another as individuals. I think it's very, very important right now. And, part of what you said about breaking into the entertainment industry being harder right now, I think it's basically everybody's got the tools to try and break into the entertainment industry. So there's a lot of noise, and it becomes harder and harder to kind of find the noise that you want to listen to.
That's good.
And the part of that becomes challenging is a lot of the noise that we're receiving right now is what we're meant to believe and what various corners want us to believe about other corners.
Yeah.
And the second I hear that, the second I start to feel like someone's got an agenda, I just I don't have any time for it anymore. I run the other way. I really seek out, if you're saying this, somebody else is saying the opposite thing.
Yeah.
And I just want to educate myself on both sides. So I may sit and listen to the one, but you can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to go and look and see what I can find out about the other.
Yeah. I think you got to look after your own mental health. And sometimes someone else's opinion can be too much. Like they can be completely over and above, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not saying that for them, you're allowed to be that way. But for me, or even for you, John, I think just taking a step back away from that person while they're going on and on and on, and just looking after yourself, I think that is also important, because at the end of the day, if you're not looking after your mental health, then what else have you got? Like it's it's not good, but yeah. Anyway.
No, I'm with you. My dog is looking at the door like he's about to start barking at it, and I don't want you to get interrupted.
It's all good, man. My dog's on the couch at the moment. She's like, you'll be able to hear her. Trust me, she's got a loud bark. But John, this has been a fun conversation. I've enjoyed getting to know more about you and unboxing the many stories that you no doubt have in your life still to come as well. which is very exciting. So I appreciate you making the time to be here today. My final question for you, my friend, is a question that I love asking all my guests at the very end. It's a hypothetical one, but I want you to imagine with me for a moment that you've been able to reach the age of 100. All your friends and your family have decided to put together a film for you of everything you've ever said and everything you've ever done. Don't ask me how in the world they got it all. We'll just call it magic for sake of argument. They've been able to get it and show it to you on your 100th birthday. What do you want that film to say and to show about your life?
That I was happy and that I was grateful more than I was sad and depressed.
It's a beautiful send-off message, man. John, thank you so much for your time today, man, your story, your wisdom, your advice, and for joining me today on the Storybox podcast.
Thanks a lot, Jay.